The Vellari homeworld stretched before Sean like a fever dream wrapped in starlight. Bioluminescent spires twisted skyward through the humid air, their surfaces pulsing with veins of gold and silver that painted the perpetual twilight in shifting hues. The jungle breathed around him, literally breathed, as phosphorescent vines expanded and contracted in slow, hypnotic rhythms. Even the ground beneath his boots glowed faintly, responding to his footsteps with ripples of blue-green light. Sean adjusted his diplomatic sash, the formal Earth insignia feeling absurdly small against the alien grandeur surrounding him. His green eyes swept the landing platform where a delegation of Vellari waited, their tall, angular forms casting dancing shadows in the organic light. At their center stood their ambassador, and Sean's breath caught despite himself. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, 7 feet of elegant, predatory grace. Her bioluminescent skin shifted from cool silver to warm amber as she observed his approach, the metallic tendrils that served as her hair catching the light like liquid mercury. When she tilted her head, studying him with those amber-flecked eyes, Sean felt distinctly like prey being assessed by a very patient hunter. "Ambassador Kaelith," Sean said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm Sean Chen, representing Earth's diplomatic corps." Those luminous eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement. "So small," she murmured, her voice a melodic hum that seemed to resonate in his chest. "So limited." Her own hand when she took his was warm and surprisingly soft despite its angular length. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. Her skin actually hummed with barely contained energy. "Limited in stature, perhaps," Sean replied, allowing his trademark lopsided grin to surface, "but we humans have other qualities that might surprise you." Kaelith's tendrils quivered, a reaction she quickly suppressed. "Indeed, I have heard your species is creative in their approaches to diplomacy." The way she said creative made it sound like a polite term for chaotic and unpredictable. As they walked toward the towering council chambers, Sean caught glimpses of other Vellari watching from the glowing terraces above. Their bioluminescence seemed to pulse in synchronized patterns. Communication, perhaps, or simply shared amusement at the small human's presumption. "Your world is incredible," Sean said, genuinely awed as they passed beneath an archway that seemed to be carved from a single massive pearl. The integration of biology and architecture, it's unlike anything in human space. "Of course it is." Kaelith's response was matter-of-fact rather than boastful. "We have had millennia to perfect our harmony with our world. Your species builds things that fight against nature, do you not?" "Sometimes," Sean admitted, "but we also build things that shouldn't work at all, yet somehow do." That earned him a longer look, her amber eyes narrowing with what might have been curiosity. They entered the council chamber, a vast dome-shaped space where the walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with soft phosphorescence that ebbed and flowed like a slow heartbeat. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Kaelith said, her voice carrying a note of ceremoniousness that made Sean's diplomatic instincts prickle with warning, "there is a matter of symbolism that must be addressed." Sean waited, studying her expression. The amber flecks in her eyes seemed to dance with suppressed mirth. "Our people value unity above all else," she continued. "True peace between our species would require more than mere treaties. It would require—" She paused, her skin brightening with what Sean was beginning to recognize as the Vellari equivalent of a smile, "a joining of our bloodlines, a symbolic union between our species." The chamber fell silent except for the subtle hum of bioluminescent systems. Sean could feel the attention of every Vellari present focused on him like a physical weight. This was clearly meant to be the moment where the human diplomat stammered, made excuses, and retreated to safer, more conventional terms. Instead, Sean's grin widened. "You're proposing marriage?" Kaelith's bioluminescence flickered. Surprise, perhaps even shock. "I am proposing an interspecies breeding bond," she said carefully, "though I hardly expect a human to accept." The words dropped into the chamber like stones into still water. The silence that followed was profound enough that Sean could hear his own heartbeat. Kaelith's skin had gone completely silver, her tendrils frozen in mid-sway. "You accept?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Absolutely." Sean stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny patterns of light that danced just beneath her translucent skin. Though I should warn you, humans have some very specific ideas about courtship rituals. We might need to negotiate the terms. For the first time since his arrival, Kaelith's perfect composure cracked. Her skin flashed gold, a brief, brilliant flare that made the chamber walls dim by comparison before settling back to its neutral silver. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note he hadn't heard before: uncertainty. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we should discuss this arrangement in greater detail." Sean's scarred cheek twitched as his grin became something sharper, more predatory. "Ambassador Kaelith," he said, pitching his voice low enough that she had to lean slightly forward to hear him, "I think that's an excellent idea." The Vellari capital at dawn was a symphony of light and motion that made Sean's eyes water with its beauty. Crystalline towers sang in harmonic frequencies as the morning thermals shifted, while carpet moss pathways glowed brighter under his boots, as if the city itself welcomed his presence. Beside him, Kaelith moved with fluid grace, her bioluminescence muted to soft silver in the daylight. "Your cities grow," she observed, glancing at him with those amber-flecked eyes. "Ours sing." "Different approaches to the same goal," Sean replied, pausing to examine a flowering arch that pulsed with veins of rose-gold light. "Though I have to admit, your architecture has a certain romantic quality to it." The comment earned him another of those quick golden flares across her skin, too brief to be intentional, too bright to be missed. Her tendrils curled slightly inward, a gesture he was learning indicated either annoyance or intrigue. With Kaelith, the two seemed dangerously interchangeable. "Romance is a human concept," she said, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. "We value compatibility, genetic harmony, practical considerations." "And yet you proposed a symbolic union rather than a trade agreement," Sean pointed out, stopping beside a fountain where bioluminescent fish created trails of blue-white light in the flowing water. "That suggests your people understand the power of emotional gestures." Kaelith turned to face him fully, her height advantage forcing Sean to tilt his head back to meet her gaze. The movement brought them closer together, close enough that he could smell the faint ozone scent of her bioelectric field. "You are attempting to analyze us," she said, "to find patterns you can exploit." "I'm trying to understand you," Sean corrected. "There's a difference, though I'll admit understanding often leads to appreciation, and appreciation can become something more." Her skin flickered gold again, longer this time. "You speak strangely for a diplomat." "You proposed interspecies breeding on our first meeting," Sean shot back with a laugh. "I'd say we're both operating outside normal diplomatic protocols." The sound of his laughter seemed to catch her off guard. Her tendrils swayed forward slightly, almost as if reaching toward him, before she caught herself and pulled them back. "The breeding proposal was meant to—" She paused, her bioluminescence dimming. "Your species was supposed to find it overwhelming, impossible. It was intended to demonstrate the gulf between our peoples." "Instead, it demonstrated that humans don't back down from challenges," Sean said, "even attractive ones." "Attractive," the word came out as barely a whisper. Before Sean could respond, a new voice interrupted them, deep, resonant, and clearly amused. "Kaelith, are you going to introduce me to your intended?" Sean turned to see another Vellari approaching, this one male and massive, even by their species standards. His obsidian skin was marked with scars that gleamed silver in the morning light, and his violet eyes held a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Rukar," Kaelith said, her formal composure snapping back into place. "This is Ambassador Sean Chen. Sean, this is War-Leader Rukar, my guardian." "Guardian?" Sean extended his hand, unsurprised when Rukar's grip proved strong enough to crush stone. "I thought Vellari were individually capable of defending themselves." "We are," Rukar rumbled, though he seemed impressed that Sean hadn't flinched at his grip strength. "But Kaelith is precious to our people. Her safety is paramount." "I can appreciate that sentiment," Sean said, meaning it. When he glanced back at Kaelith, he found her watching him with an unreadable expression, her skin a shifting pattern of silver and gold. "The Council has agreed to your proposal," Rukar continued, though his tone suggested he found the whole situation absurd. They wish to test whether a human can truly understand Vellari ways. You will participate in the argument of voices this afternoon." Sean looked between them. "I'm sorry, the what now?" "A formal debate," Kaelith explained, though her posture had gone rigid. "Our method of resolving philosophical differences. It requires intense mental discipline." "And if I fail?" "Then the treaty negotiations end," Rukar said bluntly, "along with your breeding proposal." Sean rubbed his jaw, a gesture that made Kaelith's eyes track the movement of his hand with sudden focus. "What's the topic?" "Whether emotional bonds can strengthen political alliances, or if they inevitably weaken them," Kaelith said. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Sean caught the slight tremor in her words. "Interesting choice," he mused. "Personal stakes much?" Her skin flashed gold so brightly that both males stepped back in surprise. "The council chose the topic," she said quickly. "I had no input." "Of course not," Sean agreed, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Well then, Ambassador Kaelith, shall we find somewhere private to prepare for the debate?" The way he said prepare made her tendrils quiver again. Yes, that would be practical." As they walked deeper into the singing city, Sean noticed that Kaelith kept glancing at him sideways, her bioluminescence shifting in patterns he was beginning to recognize as signs of internal conflict. When their hands accidentally brushed while navigating a narrow bridge, she didn't pull away immediately. "Sean," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the harmonic hum of the towers around them. "Yes? The argument of voices. It's not just about winning. It's about understanding, about seeing past surface differences to find deeper truths." Sean smiled, the expression softening the harsh line of his scar. "Kaelith, I think I'm beginning to understand that's exactly what we've been doing since I arrived." Her response was a flare of gold that lit up the bridge like a small sun, followed immediately by a return to nervous silver. But this time, when their hands brushed again, she let her fingers linger against his for just a moment longer than accident could explain. In the distance, a deep rumble echoed across the city, not quite thunder, not quite machinery. Rukar's head snapped up, his expression suddenly alert. "What was that?" Sean asked. "Nothing," Kaelith said quickly, but her bioluminescence had gone dim with worry. "Just city maintenance." But Sean had spent too many years reading people, and now aliens, to miss the signs. Something was wrong, and whatever it was putting fear into beings who had seemed utterly confident just moments before. The stakes of his impromptu courtship, he realized, might be higher than anyone had initially let on. The treaty chamber hummed with tension as thick as the bioluminescent atmosphere outside. Sean sat across from 5 Vellari councilors, their angular forms casting dancing shadows in the organic light that pulsed through the living walls. 3 days of negotiations had yielded nothing but circular arguments and thinly veiled disdain. "Your proposals lack substance," Councilor Vorsa declared, her gray exoskeleton dull compared to Kaelith's luminous beauty. Red eyes glared at Sean with barely contained hostility. "Humans speak of cooperation while your military vessels patrol our borders." "Our ships are there by mutual agreement," Sean replied calmly, though his jaw tightened, "as outlined in the preliminary accords your people signed 6 months ago." "Accords that assumed human competence," another counselor interjected, "an assumption that grows more questionable with each passing hour." Sean's hands clenched briefly beneath the translucent table, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Kaelith. Her amber-flecked eyes met his across the chamber, and he caught the faintest flicker of gold across her skin. Sympathy, perhaps, or something deeper. "Perhaps," Sean said, rising slowly from his seat, "we need to reconsider our approach entirely." The chamber fell silent. Even the bioluminescent walls seemed to dim their pulsing, as if the building itself was holding its breath. "I propose a trial of worth," Sean continued, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed space. "Let me prove humanity's strength in a manner your people will understand and respect." Vorsa's bone ridges clicked in what Sean had learned was the Vellari equivalent of scornful laughter. "A human? In our sacred combat trials, you jest?" "I never jest about honor," Sean replied, meeting her crimson gaze steadily. "Name your terms." The silence stretched until Kaelith spoke, her melodic voice carefully controlled. The trial of worth is not a game, Sean. It is ancient, sacred, and often fatal. All the more reason to take it seriously, Sean said, then looked directly at her. Unless you believe humans are incapable of meeting Vellari standards? Her skin flashed gold so quickly it was almost subliminal. I believe nothing of the sort. The words came out sharper than diplomatic protocol demanded, earning her sharp looks from her fellow counselors. Very well, Vorsa said, her scarred ridges gleaming with malicious anticipation. If the human wishes to embarrass himself and his species before our entire population, who are we to deny such entertainment? The trial will be in 3 days, Kaelith announced, her voice steady despite the worried gold flickering at her temples. You will face Korax, our youngest war leader. He has never lost a combat trial. And if I win, then humanity will have proven worthy of true partnership, Kaelith said, and your breeding proposal will be given serious consideration. And if I lose? Vorsa's smile was all sharp angles. Then the treaty dies with you. That evening, Sean found himself in a training chamber deep within the living city, its walls pulsing with a steady blue rhythm that seemed designed to calm nerves. It wasn't working. Across from him, Kaelith moved with deadly grace, her 7-foot frame flowing through combat forms that looked more like lethal ballet than martial arts. Your stance is too rigid, she said, circling him with predatory fluidity. Vellari combat emphasizes adaptation, not brute force. Good thing I'm adaptable, Sean replied, trying to mirror her movements and failing spectacularly. She moved behind him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her bioluminescent skin. Your balance is better than I expected, she admitted quietly. When her hands touched his shoulders to adjust his posture, her skin flared gold at the contact points. But you're thinking like a human. Hard habit to break, Sean said, hyper-aware of her proximity. Her hands were still on his shoulders, longer than strictly necessary for instruction. Think like water, she murmured, her breath warm against his ear. Flow around obstacles. Find the cracks in your opponent's defense and... Her hands slid down his arms, ostensibly demonstrating technique, but the gesture felt intimate, deliberate. Slip through. Sean turned in her grip, bringing them face to face, or rather, face to chest, given their height difference. Like this? Her tendrils had begun to sway toward him before she caught herself and stepped back, her skin cycling rapidly between silver and gold. Yes, exactly like that. They trained in relative silence after that, the air thick with unspoken tension. Every correction she made involved touch, adjusting his stance, guiding his movements, demonstrating holds that brought them breathlessly close together. Each contact sent gold racing across her skin like captured lightning. Kaelith, Sean said during a brief rest, both of them sitting on the chamber floor with careful space between them. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really propose the breeding bond? Her luminescence dimmed to almost nothing, making her look suddenly vulnerable. Because the Council believed it would horrify you, prove that humans and Vellari could never truly unite. She looked at him sideways, her expression unreadable. Instead, you said yes without hesitation. Maybe I had my reasons. Such as... Sean was quiet for a long moment, studying the play of light beneath her translucent skin. Maybe I wanted to see if the most beautiful diplomat in known space was as intriguing as she appeared. The gold flare that followed was brilliant enough to temporarily blind him. When his vision cleared, Kaelith was staring at him with something approaching shock. You find me beautiful? Stunning, Sean said simply. Terrifying, complicated, and absolutely stunning. Her response was interrupted by a distant explosion that shook the entire training chamber. The bioluminescent walls flickered as emergency patterns began pulsing through the city's organic network. What was that? Sean asked, but Kaelith was already moving, her diplomatic composure replaced by military alertness. Stay here, she commanded, but Sean was already following her toward the chamber exit. Not a chance. They emerged into chaos. The city's normal harmonic singing had been replaced by discordant warning tones, and Vellari were moving with urgent purpose through the glowing streets. In the distance, smoke rose from one of the council spires. Sabotage, Kaelith whispered, her skin pale with fear. Someone doesn't want this treaty to succeed. As if summoned by her words, a figure stepped out of the shadows ahead, a Vellari in dark armor, raising what was unmistakably a weapon. Sean moved without thinking, tackling Kaelith to the ground as energy bolts seared the air where they'd been standing. They rolled behind a phosphorescent barrier, her body pressed against his, both hearts racing. "Are you hurt?" he asked, checking her for injuries. "No, but—" Her words were cut off as more shots rang out. "Sean, they're trying to kill us both." "Then we'd better make sure they fail," Sean said grimly. "Any ideas?" Kaelith's skin was cycling through rapid patterns of gold and silver, fear and determination warring across her features. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos, "but you'll have to trust me." Sean looked into her luminous eyes and saw something that made his breath catch. Not just attraction or diplomatic alliance, but something deeper, something worth fighting for. "Kaelith," he said quietly, as energy bolts continued to spark around their shelter, "I already do." Her response was a flash of gold so pure and bright it seemed to come from her very soul. The corridors of the Vellari Council complex twisted like living arteries, their bioluminescent walls pulsing with urgent red warnings that cast everything in hellish shadows. Sean pressed his back against the warm organic surface, Kaelith beside him, her skin muted to dark silver for stealth. The attackers had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving only scorched walls and unanswered questions. "This wasn't random," Sean whispered, his breath barely stirring the air between them. "Someone knew exactly where we'd be." Kaelith's tendrils curled tight against her skull, a sign of stress he was learning to read. "The training schedule is restricted information. Only the Council and—" She trailed off, her amber eyes widening with realization. "And the senior staff, including Aide Thassan." Her voice carried the weight of betrayal. "He's been with the Council for decades. I never suspected." Sean touched her arm, feeling the electric warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her diplomatic robes. The contact sent a familiar flicker of gold across her features. "We need proof before we make accusations." "Then we investigate," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "But Sean, if there truly is a traitor in the Council—" "Then your people are in as much danger as mine," he finished, "which means we work together." They moved through the complex like shadows, Kaelith's natural grace making her nearly invisible, while Sean relied on skills learned in less diplomatic circumstances. The aides' quarters were in the administrative wing, far from the public areas where delegates might accidentally overhear sensitive conversations. "There," Kaelith breathed, pointing to a door marked with flowing Vellari script, "Thessan's private office." The lock yielded to Sean's improvised tools, a diplomatic skill they didn't teach in the academy but proved invaluable in practice. Inside, the office was austere by Vellari standards, lacking the flowing organic curves that characterized most of their architecture. "Help me search," Sean said, moving toward a crystalline data node that hummed with stored information. "Look for anything that seems out of place." They worked in tense silence, their bodies moving around each other in the small space with an awareness that went beyond mere practicality. Every accidental brush of hands or shoulders sent gold racing across Kaelith's skin, while Sean found himself hyper-aware of her every movement. "Sean," Kaelith said suddenly, her voice tight with discovery, "look at this." She held a small communication device, its surface dark but clearly of foreign manufacture. "This isn't Vellari technology." Sean examined it carefully. "Not human either. The design aesthetics are all wrong." He frowned, running his thumb across the smooth surface. "But I've seen something like this before. Trade delegation from the Kythera Hegemony about 2 years ago." The Kythera? Kaelith's bioluminescence flared with alarm. "They were our enemies before humanity arrived. If they're involved in sabotaging the treaty, then they want us to go back to war," Sean concluded grimly, "with humans caught in the middle." A soft sound from the corridor outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, moving with purpose toward the office. Sean grabbed Kaelith's hand, pulling her toward an alcove behind the data storage units, just as the door chimed with an entry request. They pressed together in the narrow space, Sean's back against the wall, and Kaelith's tall form curved over him protectively. Her skin had gone almost completely dark, but he could still see the rapid flutter of pulse points along her throat, could smell the ozone-sweet scent of her bioelectric field. The door opened, and Aide Tessin entered, his movements furtive and quick. He went directly to a hidden panel in the wall that neither Sean nor Kaelith had found, revealing a cache of communication equipment that definitely wasn't standard Vellari issue. Yes, the human survived the attack, Tessin said into a device, his voice carrying clearly in the small space. But Kaelith grows more attached to it daily. If we're to prevent this alliance— Sean felt Kaelith tense against him, her anger manifesting as heat that made the air around them shimmer. Her tendrils had begun to move with suppressed violence, and he placed a gentle hand on her arm to steady her. "The trial is in 2 days, Tessin continued. If Chen somehow survives that, we'll need more direct methods. The hegemony won't tolerate a human Vellari alliance." The conversation continued for several more minutes, outlining a plot that went far deeper than simple sabotage. When Tessin finally left, Sean and Kaelith remained frozen in their hiding place until the footsteps faded completely. "We have to warn the Council," Kaelith whispered, but she made no move to step away from him. "We will," Sean agreed, equally reluctant to break their intimate proximity. "But carefully. If Tessin has been feeding information to the Kythera for years, we don't know how deep this conspiracy goes." She nodded, her face so close to his that he could see the complex patterns of light that danced just beneath her skin. "Sean, when I heard them planning to kill you—" "I know," he said softly. "I felt the same way." Her tendrils had begun to move again, but slowly this time, reaching toward him with unmistakable intent. When they brushed against his cheek, he felt a tingling that had nothing to do with her bioelectric field. "This is dangerous," she whispered, though she didn't pull away. "The most worthwhile things usually are," Sean replied, lifting his hand to cover hers where it rested against his face. The golden flare that followed was so intense it briefly illuminated the entire alcove. But this time, Kaelith didn't try to suppress it or step away. Instead, she leaned closer, her luminous eyes searching his face as if trying to memorize every detail. "After the trial," she said, her voice barely audible. "After the trial," he agreed. But even as they finally stepped apart and began planning their next move, both knew that the feelings building between them had already moved far beyond diplomatic necessity. The question was whether they'd live long enough to explore what that might mean. Another distant explosion shook the complex, reminding them that their enemies weren't waiting for convenient timing. Whatever was growing between them would have to survive not just cultural differences and political intrigue, but open warfare. As they slipped back into the corridors, moving with shared purpose toward the council chambers, Sean caught Kaelith's hand in his. She didn't pull away. "Together?" he asked. "Together," she confirmed, her skin brightening with determination and something that looked remarkably like hope. The private training chamber hummed with tension as Sean moved through combat sequences that would have seemed impossible 3 days ago. His human frame, compact and wiry compared to Vellari physiology, flowed through movements that emphasized speed and unpredictability over raw strength. Across the space, Kaelith watched with eyes that tracked his every motion, her bioluminescence shifting between gold and silver like captured starlight. "Better," she said, stepping closer as he completed a particularly complex defensive pattern. "But Korax will not be impressed by technique alone. He'll try to intimidate you before the combat even begins." Sean paused, wiping sweat from his brow. The motion drew Kaelith's gaze to the scar on his cheek, and her tendrils swayed forward slightly before she caught herself. "How intimidating can he be?" "He stands 9 feet tall," Kaelith replied, moving to adjust his stance with hands that lingered longer than necessary on his shoulders. "His exoskeleton is reinforced with metal grafts, and he's never lost a trial combat. The last opponent he faced spent 3 months in regeneration." "Cheerful," Sean said, but his grin was undaunted. The expression made Kaelith's skin flare gold, and this time she didn't try to hide it. "You're not taking this seriously enough," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'm taking it exactly as seriously as it deserves," Sean replied, catching her hands before she could step away. "Which is to say, I'm going to win." Her fingers intertwined with his, warm and electric. "Your confidence is," she searched for words, "either inspiring or terrifying." Why not both? The private moment was interrupted by Terran's arrival, the young engineer laden with equipment that clinked and hummed with barely contained energy. His sandy hair was more disheveled than usual, and his blue eyes bright with the manic focus of someone who'd been working through the night. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though his grin suggested he wasn't sorry at all, "but I've got some toys that might even the odds tomorrow." Sean reluctantly released Kaelith's hands, noting how her skin dimmed at the loss of contact. "What kind of toys?" "Modified kinetic amplifiers," Terran said, producing what looked like ordinary cloth bands. "Slip these around your wrists and ankles. They'll boost your reaction speed by about 20% and add some extra force to your strikes." "Is that legal?" Kaelith asked, her diplomatic training warring with obvious concern for Sean's safety. "Completely within trial regulations," Terran assured her. "No energy weapons, no projectiles, no external power sources. These just store and redirect kinetic energy. Perfectly organic augmentation." Sean examined the devices, impressed despite himself. "How did you manage this so quickly?" "Didn't sleep," Terran said simply. "Also, may have borrowed some components from our shuttle's navigation system, so we're stuck here until I can fabricate replacements." "Terran, it's fine," the engineer said quickly. "Besides, I've been analyzing Vellari combat recordings. Their fighting style has some exploitable patterns if you know what to look for." Kellis' posture stiffened. "You've been studying our warriors?" "For the past 3 days," Terran confirmed cheerfully. "No offense, but your people fight like they're performing a dance. Very elegant, very efficient, but also very predictable once you map the movement patterns." "Our combat forms are refined over centuries," Kaelith said, her voice cooling. "Which is exactly the problem," Sean interjected, understanding immediately. "Refinement leads to rigidity, and rigid patterns can be broken." The golden flare that crossed Kaelith's features suggested she understood the implications. "You mean to fight chaotically?" "I mean to fight like a human," Sean said, "unpredictably, adaptively, and with complete disregard for established patterns." Later, as Terran ran final diagnostics on the kinetic amplifiers, Kaelith drew Sean aside to a quiet corner of the chamber. The walls here pulsed with softer light, creating an intimate atmosphere that made conversation feel confessional. "Sean," she said quietly, "there's something else about tomorrow's trial. Something I should have mentioned earlier." Her reluctance to meet his eyes suggested whatever she was about to reveal was significant. "What is it?" "The trial isn't just combat," she said. "It's a bonding ritual. If you win, if you defeat Korax in single combat, then according to our laws, you and I—" She trailed off, her skin cycling through rapid patterns of gold and silver. "We'd be actually bonded?" Sean asked, "not just symbolically." "Legally, socially, and," her voice dropped to barely a whisper, "physically." The implications hit Sean like a physical blow. "You're saying that if I win this fight, we're essentially married by Vellari law?" "More than married," Kaelith said, finally meeting his eyes. "Bonded pairs share everything, thoughts, emotions, even physical sensations to some degree. It's the deepest connection our species can achieve." Sean was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. "And if I lose?" "Then you die," she said simply, "and the treaty dies with you." "Right." Sean rubbed his jaw, a gesture that made Kaelith's tendrils sway toward him. "So no pressure." "You could withdraw," she said quickly. "There's no shame in recognizing impossible odds. We could find another way to—" "Kaelith!" Sean caught her hands again, noting how her skin immediately brightened at the contact. "Do you want me to withdraw?" Her answer came not in words, but in a flare of gold so intense it briefly outshone the chamber's bioluminescent walls. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the emotion radiating from her skin. "I want you to survive," she said. "Everything else we can figure out together." "Then that's what I'll do," Sean said simply. "Survive, win, and figure out the rest with you." She leaned closer, close enough that he could feel the electric tingle of her biofield against his skin. "The bonding process, it's not something either of us can control if you win. Our nervous systems will synchronize automatically. You'll feel everything I feel, and I'll feel everything you feel. That sounds, Sean paused, considering, intense. Overwhelming, Kaelith corrected, especially the first time. And Sean, there's never been. She struggled with the words, her usual eloquence deserting her. You've never been bonded before, Sean finished gently. Neither have you, she pointed out. No, Sean agreed, but I'm looking forward to learning with you. The golden radiance that followed was so bright, Terran looked up from his equipment in alarm. But when he saw the way Sean and Kaelith were looking at each other, he simply smiled and returned to his work, giving them what privacy he could in the small space. After tomorrow, Kaelith whispered, everything changes. Everything already has, Sean replied, then gently rested his forehead against hers, a gesture of connection more heartfelt than any words. The morning of the trial of worth dawned with a chilling, crystalline clarity. The Vellari capital, usually a symphony of light and soft hums, was hushed, its bioluminescent spires glowing with a somber, expectant light. Sean felt the weight of countless eyes on him as he walked beside Kaelith towards the grand arena, a colossal amphitheater carved from living rock, its tiered seating already filled with thousands of Vellari, their collective bioluminescence creating a shimmering tapestry of anticipation. Kaelith's skin was a muted silver, reflecting the solemnity of the occasion, but her hand, when it brushed his, was warm and electric. "Are you ready?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the low murmur of the crowd. "As I'll ever be," Sean replied, his own heart thrumming with a mix of nerves and exhilaration. He felt the subtle hum of Terran's kinetic amplifiers beneath his diplomatic robes, a silent promise of enhanced speed and power. They reached the entrance to the arena floor, a vast circular expanse of polished obsidian that seemed to absorb all light. At the far end, a massive Vellari stood, his form a mountain of reinforced exoskeleton and scarred muscle. Korax. He was indeed 9 feet tall, his violet eyes burning with an ancient, unwavering pride. He wore no armor, only a simple loincloth, his body a testament to centuries of martial tradition. Sean felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a fight. It was a statement about humanity's place in the galaxy, about their resilience, and about his personal commitment to Kaelith and the burgeoning alliance. As they stepped onto the obsidian floor, a deep, resonant gong echoed through the arena, silencing the crowd. Kaelith moved to stand beside a group of counselors, her gaze fixed on Sean, a flicker of gold betraying her inner turmoil. Councilor Vorsa, her voice amplified to fill the vast space, began the ancient ritual pronouncements. "We gather here today for the trial of worth, to witness the strength of spirit, the purity of intent, and the destiny of 2 peoples." Her red eyes flickered to Sean, a sneer barely concealed. "Korax, war-leader of the northern clans, champion of the Vellari, do you accept this challenge?" Korax's voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. "I accept, for the honor of my ancestors and the purity of our bloodlines." "Sean Chen, Ambassador of Earth, do you accept this challenge?" Vorsa's tone was laced with condescension. Sean stepped forward, standing in the center of the arena, his gaze unwavering as he met Korax's formidable stare. "I accept, for the future of humanity and the promise of a shared destiny." Another gong sounded deeper this time, signaling the start of the trial. Korax moved first, a blur of immense power. He didn't rush, but strode with deliberate, heavy steps, each footfall shaking the ground. His hands, massive and clawed, were held open, ready to crush. Sean didn't wait. He activated the kinetic amplifiers, feeling a surge of energy through his limbs. He darted forward, not at Korax, but to his side, circling the larger Vellari with a speed that seemed to surprise even Korax. "Too slow, human!" Korax roared, his voice echoing. He spun, his massive arm sweeping in a wide arc designed to swat Sean aside like an insect. But Sean wasn't there. He ducked beneath the swing, the air displaced by Korax's arm ruffling his hair. He then sprang upward, aiming a kick at Korax's knee joint. It was a precise targeted strike, amplified by Terran's tech. The impact resonated with a dull thud, and Korax's leg buckled slightly. A ripple went through the crowd. Korax, the undefeated, had been touched. Korax snarled, his eyes narrowing. "Clever, but you lack power." He lunged, a direct, powerful strike aimed at Sean's chest. Sean met the blow, not with a block, but with a parry, deflecting Korax's arm with a twist of his body, using Korax's own momentum against him. He then spun, delivering a series of rapid, unpredictable jabs to Korax's exposed side, targeting the less armored areas between his bone ridges. Each strike, though not powerful enough to fell the giant, carried a surprising sting, amplified by the kinetic tech. Korax roared, more frustrated than hurt. He was used to opponents who met his strength with their own, who fought in predictable patterns. Sean was a whirlwind of chaotic motion, constantly shifting, never where Korax expected him to be. Sean heard Kaelith's voice in his mind, a faint echo of her training. Think like water. Flow around obstacles, find the cracks. He focused, not on defeating Korax, but on disrupting his rhythm, breaking his centuries-old combat forms. He feigned a retreat, drawing Korax into a chase, then suddenly pivoted, launching himself into a low, sweeping kick that targeted Korax's other knee. The Vellari warrior stumbled, momentarily off balance. Sean seized the opportunity, leaping onto Korax's back, wrapping his legs around the massive torso and aiming a series of sharp, amplified punches at the base of Korax's skull, where the armor was thinnest. Korax thrashed, bellowing in rage, trying to dislodge Sean. He slammed himself against the obsidian floor, then against the arena walls, but Sean clung on, a human limpet delivering stinging, relentless blows. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were roaring, a chaotic mixture of shock, awe, and disbelief. No one had ever fought Korax like this. Finally, with a desperate surge of strength, Korax managed to grab Sean, tearing him from his back. He held Sean aloft, his massive hand closing around Sean's throat. Sean struggled, gasping for air, the world beginning to dim. "You are strong, human," Korax rasped, his eyes burning with a primal fury. "But this is where it ends." Sean felt the pressure on his windpipe, the black spots dancing at the edge of his vision. But then through the haze he saw Kaelith. She stood by the counselors, her skin blazing with an uncontrolled, desperate gold, her tendrils thrashing. Her eyes, wide with terror and a fierce, unspoken plea, met his. Live, her gaze screamed, "Live for us." A surge of pure, unadulterated human stubbornness, fueled by the raw emotion he felt radiating from Kaelith, coursed through Sean. He wouldn't die here. Not now. Not when everything was finally within reach. With a final, desperate burst of strength, Sean brought his knee up, slamming it with all the amplified force he could muster into Korax's groin. Korax froze, his eyes widening in shock, then pain. His grip loosened, and Sean dropped to the ground, gasping for air. The Vellari warrior doubled over, clutching himself, a low, guttural groan escaping his lips. It was an undignified, un-Vellari sound, and it stunned the entire arena into silence. Sean, still struggling to breathe, scrambled to his feet. Korax was still hunched over, momentarily incapacitated. This was his chance. He moved, not with a final crushing blow, but with a swift, precise maneuver. He slipped behind Korax, wrapped his arms around the massive neck, and applied a human rear-naked chokehold. It wasn't about brute force, it was about leverage, about cutting off blood flow to the brain. Korax thrashed, his immense strength still formidable, but Sean held on, digging in, the kinetic amplifiers giving him just enough extra grip and endurance. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Korax's struggles weakened. His bioluminescence flickered erratically, then dimmed. His mighty frame sagged. Finally, with a soft thud, he collapsed, unconscious, Sean still clinging to him. The arena was utterly silent. Then a single clear voice broke the stillness. "He yields." It was Kaelith. Her skin was a brilliant, shimmering gold, radiating pure awe and relief. The silence shattered. The Vellari crowd erupted, not with anger, but with a roar of bewildered, grudging respect. They had witnessed something entirely new. A human, small and seemingly fragile, had defeated their greatest warrior, not through brute strength, but through cunning, adaptability, and sheer unyielding will. Sean, releasing Korax, staggered back, gasping for air, his muscles screaming. He looked at Kaelith, and a wide, triumphant grin spread across his face. "I won," he croaked. Kaelith rushed forward, ignoring all protocol, her movements fluid and unstoppable. She reached him, her hands cupping his face, her luminous eyes searching his. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." And then, before Sean could react, the bonding began. It wasn't a choice or a gradual process. It was an instantaneous, overwhelming flood. Sean felt a sudden dizzying rush, as if his very being was expanding, intertwining with another. He felt Kaelith's elation, her profound relief, her astonishment, and beneath it all, a deep, resonant wave of affection and something akin to fierce protectiveness. It was like a dam breaking, a torrent of emotion and sensation that threatened to drown him. He stumbled, clutching his head, overwhelmed. He could feel the phantom ache of Korax's knee in his own, the lingering adrenaline in Kaelith's system, the faint, sweet scent of her bioelectric field, not just on his skin, but within him. Kaelith, too, reeled, her golden glow intensifying, then flickering wildly as she absorbed the shock of Sean's own tumultuous emotions. His exhaustion, his triumph, his lingering fear from Korax's chokehold, and the sudden, overwhelming rush of affection he felt for her. She gasped, her eyes widening, her tendrils flaring out like a startled halo. "Sean," she breathed, her voice a fragile whisper laced with a new profound intimacy. I can feel you." "I can feel you too, Kaelith," he replied, his voice hoarse with awe. It was disorienting, exhilarating, terrifying. Every thought, every sensation, every subtle shift in her emotional state was now his own, mirrored in his mind. He felt her wonder, her surprise, and a nascent, powerful joy. The counselors, including Vorsa, approached, their expressions a mixture of shock and reluctant acceptance. The ancient law was clear. The bond was forged. "The trial of worth is concluded," Vorsa announced, her voice strained. "By ancient law, the human Ambassador Sean Chen and Councilor Kaelith are bonded." The words seemed to stick in her throat. Rukar, the war leader, stepped forward, his obsidian skin radiating a calmer, more measured respect. He placed a hand on Sean's shoulder, a gesture of acceptance. "You fought well, human, with honor and with unexpected cunning." He glanced at Kaelith, a rare, almost imperceptible softening in his violet eyes. "And you have chosen well, Kaelith." The crowd, slowly understanding the full implications of what they had witnessed, began to cheer, a rising crescendo of sound that vibrated through Sean's very bones. It was a cheer of acceptance, of respect, and of a new, unexpected hope. Later that evening, in Kaelith's private chambers, the full impact of the bonding began to settle. The room was bathed in soft, pulsing light, reflecting the gentle rhythm of Kaelith's own bioluminescence, which had settled into a steady, warm gold. Sean sat on a low, organic divan, Kaelith beside him, their hands intertwined. The connection was still overwhelming, a constant flow of information. He felt her lingering exhaustion, the subtle hum of her nervous system, the echoes of her earlier fear, now replaced by a profound sense of peace and contentment. And she, he knew, felt his own weariness, his quiet satisfaction, and the deep, burgeoning affection he held for her. "This is intense," Sean murmured, the word feeling inadequate. "Overwhelming," Kaelith agreed, her voice soft, her gaze fixed on their joined hands. "But not unwelcome. I can feel your warmth, your steadiness." She paused, a faint flush of deeper gold spreading across her skin, "and your admiration." Sean chuckled, a sound that resonated with her, causing a ripple of shared amusement. "Can't hide anything now, can I?" "Nor I," she replied, a faint smile gracing her lips. "I felt your determination, your desire to protect me, and your appreciation of my physical form." Her skin deepened to a rich amber. "Guilty as charged," Sean admitted, squeezing her hand. "So what now? We're bonded. What does that actually mean day to day?" Kaelith turned to him fully, her luminous eyes serious. "It means we are inextricably linked. Our lives, our destinies are now intertwined. We will share burdens, joys, and responsibilities. It means that the treaty, the alliance between our peoples, is no longer merely a political document. It is a living thing, a part of us." "And the Kythera Hegemony?" Sean asked, the thought of Theson's betrayal bringing a sharp edge to his mind. He felt Kaelith's immediate surge of anger and concern, a mirror of his own. "We must address that," Kaelith said, her voice firm. "But now, with the bond, we have an undeniable advantage. The Council will listen. They will feel the truth of our connection, the sincerity of our intentions. Theson's treachery will be exposed." The next morning, Sean and Kaelith stood before the full Vellari Council, the tension in the chamber palpable. Kaelith, her skin a steady, confident gold, spoke first, her voice ringing with authority. She recounted Theson's betrayal, the Kythera Hegemony's involvement, and the assassination attempt, her words imbued with the raw emotion that Sean now felt as clearly as his own. As she spoke, Sean felt the counselor's reactions through their shared bond, their shock, their disbelief, their dawning realization. He could feel the subtle shifts in their bioluminescence, the internal arguments, the slow, inevitable acceptance of the truth. When Kaelith finished, Sean stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "We have the communication device, the one Thesson used. It carries the Kythera's unique energy signature, and if you wish, you can feel the truth of our words, the sincerity of our bond, yourselves." He looked directly at Vorsa. "The Kythera want war. They want to divide us. But humanity and Vellari, united, will not be broken." Vorsa, her face unreadable, looked from Sean to Kaelith, then back to Sean. She extended a hand, and Sean placed the communication device in her palm. He felt her surprise at its foreign feel, then a flicker of recognition as she accessed its stored data. He felt her dawning horror as she saw the evidence, the undeniable proof of Thesson's treachery and the Kythera's machinations. She looked up, her gaze meeting Kaelith's. "He will be apprehended," she stated, her voice grim. "The Kythera will be informed that their interference will be met with the full force of a united Vellari and human alliance." The council moved with swift, decisive action. Thesson was arrested, his betrayal sending shockwaves through the Vellari government. The evidence of Kythera involvement was undeniable, solidifying the new alliance between humans and Vellari. The treaty, once a fragile document, was now cemented by a bond far stronger than any political agreement. In the weeks that followed, Sean and Kaelith navigated their new reality. The bond was a constant, intimate presence, a silent conversation that transcended words. They learned to filter the constant flow of emotion and sensation, to focus on what was important, to understand each other on a level no two beings had ever achieved before. Sean found himself adapting to Vellari customs with surprising ease, his human adaptability amplified by Kaelith's innate understanding. He learned to appreciate the subtle nuances of their bioluminescent communication, the deep harmony they shared with their living world. He even found himself enjoying the occasional philosophical debate, now armed with Kaelith's insights into Vellari thought. Kaelith, in turn, found herself embracing aspects of human culture she had once dismissed as chaotic. Sean's laughter, his irreverent humor, his boundless curiosity, all resonated with her, bringing out a lightness and joy she hadn't known she possessed. She found herself more expressive, her bioluminescence flaring with amusement or affection in ways she had once suppressed. Their personal bond became a beacon for the broader alliance. Other Vellari, initially skeptical, saw the profound connection between their counselor and the human ambassador. They witnessed the genuine respect, the shared purpose, the deep affection that radiated from the bonded pair. It was a testament to the idea that true unity could transcend species, culture, and even ancient animosities. The Kythera Hegemony, faced with a united front of two formidable species, retreated, their plans for galactic destabilization thwarted. The human-Vellari alliance flourished, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared knowledge, and the unique unbreakable bond between Sean and Kaelith. One evening, Sean and Kaelith stood on a high terrace overlooking the Vellari capital. The city pulsed with a gentle, harmonious light, a testament to the peace they had forged. The stars above were a brilliant tapestry, promising endless possibilities. "It's beautiful," Sean said, his voice soft, feeling Kaelith's contentment mirror his own. "It is," she agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder, a gesture that felt utterly natural now. Her skin pulsed with a deep, contented gold. "And it is ours, all of it." "So what's next, Ambassador Kaelith?" Sean asked, a familiar grin touching his lips. "More diplomatic missions? More interspecies bonding rituals?" Kaelith chuckled, a melodic sound that vibrated through their shared connection. "Perhaps. But first," she said, turning to face him, her luminous eyes shining with a profound love, "I believe we have a lifetime of learning to do, together." She reached up, her tendrils brushing his cheek, sending a familiar electric tingle through him. "And Sean," she whispered, her voice filled with a warmth that reached into his very soul, "I believe it is time we truly explored what this bond means. Beyond diplomacy, beyond politics, just us." Sean leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers once more. He felt her anticipation, her tenderness, her complete and utter trust. And in that moment, as their two beings, two species, two souls, intertwined in a dance of light and emotion, Sean knew with absolute certainty that everything had indeed changed. And it was only the beginning.